I think it's always good, especially as a person who is goal oriented, that, to really be in a position to say, you know what, I need to get away. I need to change my environment. I need to be in a place where there's no distractions. There's no kids running around in the background. There's none of this stuff. So you can just get away and be clear.
If I could tell my younger self, I'd say move faster, younger.
It's important to continue to reinvent yourself, reinvent your strategy, reassess if what you're doing is working, and use data and feedback loops to make sure that you're not just falling behind. I don't believe in the fact that the tariffs has created this land, this whole large amount, this windfall. Yes, this windfall of money.
When we see the budget, we'll know, right? I mean, yes.
We'll see it. I just think it's smoke and mirrors. I think the idea of $2,000 though is a bad idea, because I think that money would be better served. Let's just assume that it was an actual windfall and it was profits that were coming back to the government, so on and so forth. I think that money would be better spent to reduce the deficit.
The biggest issue I have is that I don't think that I would trust the American consumer or the average American or whatever you want to call it. I hate when you have to say like the average American or whatever. I'm just going to say I would trust any American to spend that $2,000 before I trust any government to spend that money. This is it now. This is, we're never going back. Like, this is the new normal now. This is the new baseline now, based on where we're at. Like, prices are never going back down ever again.
Prices have never gone down historically. I mean, because if you look at it historically, when you look at cost of living adjustment, which is lockstep with the inflation rate, it's typically 2% per year. And so costs have always gone up. I mean, if you go back and look at McDonald's burgers now versus back in the 50s, housing, cars, everything, nothing right. goes down. It's just the rate of acceleration slowing down commensurate to income. And so, there's a lot that you said to unpack. The only concern that I have right now, because that's an optimistic view. And I started off by saying I have a pretty pessimistic view. My pessimism comes from the standpoint that because technology is such a tool that can be used to concentrate power and influence and the control of resources from right. the many to the few, you need fewer people to do even more work productively, that people have the ability to hoard those resources.
That I see is kind of opening. And I don't want to get too like utopian and all that stuff, but realistically, if you think about it, people in a true free market open society where the country is legitimately ran by an elected body that's for the people, by the people, the profits of all the countries should be going to the people. So therefore, taxes should be virtually almost nothing or zero. And therefore, people shouldn't really have to work unless they want to become uber wealthy and create new stuff, because that's the thing. Human invention and human ingenuity is always going to be there.
Hey, it's like guns, cars, anything you want.
It's unbelievable.
If you can imagine it, a 3D printer can print it. And
it
yes,
is unbelievable.
Machine parts, everything. Yeah. I think something like that would certainly be possible. I think we're probably 20 years away from that, but I definitely with my own eyes have seen existing technologies that lend itself to. The only concern that I have right now, because that's an optimistic view. And I started off by saying I have a pretty pessimistic view. My pessimism comes from the standpoint that because technology is such a tool that can be used to concentrate power and influence and the control of resources from right. the many to the few, you need fewer people to do even more work productively, that people have the ability to hoard those resources.
That I see is kind of opening. And I don't want to get too like utopian and all that stuff, but realistically, if you think about it, people in a true free market open society where the country is legitimately ran by an elected body that's for the people, by the people, the profits of all the countries should be going to the people. So therefore, taxes should be virtually almost nothing or zero. And therefore, people shouldn't really have to work unless they want to become uber wealthy and create new stuff, because that's the thing. Human invention and human ingenuity is always going to be there.
It's like guns, cars, anything you want.
It's unbelievable.
If you can imagine it, a 3D printer can print it. And
it
yes,
unbelievable.
Machine parts, everything. Yeah. I think something like that would certainly be possible. I think we're probably 20 years away from that, but I definitely, with my own eyes, have seen existing technologies that lend itself to. How do you feel about that? Okay, so because like on the one hand, I hear you say it a lot, America's the greatest country in the history of the world. We're so lucky to be Americans, and all of this, like on the one hand, you have, all of these superlatives about this country. But then on the other hand, you have all of this muck and just nefarious, underhanded activity that takes place. That's like this clandestine, behind the veil stuff that's concealed away from us. How do you reconcile those two perspectives for you?
I reconcile it very simply. I think people take a very ignorant approach when they get up on a soapbox and say, "Oh my God, America should be more like this, and this is how so and so does it here," and and we start comparing each other. I think it's very ignorant when we do that, because we're human beings just like they're human beings, right? We're human beings just like they're human beings. I'm sorry, but the facts are the facts. And America has only had one revolution. One. All these other countries that talk trash and say these things, and all these countries, actually, I shouldn't say it that way. All these other countries where people in this country go, well, we should go here because they do it so much better, and there's so much this. So let's go to some other countries where they've had revolutions as soon as 50 years ago, 20 years ago, that you think are so much better. Like Ukraine, oh my God, then go there. France, then go there. UK, then go there. Because in the UK, you have Sharia law courts now. In London. So then go there. Mm-hmm. Cuba, then go there. China, then go there. Go. Because if you're gay, you'll get thrown off a building. You can't own property in those countries. If you're a woman, you got to wear a burqa, or you don't have the amount of rights you have in America that you have in a different country. So the way I justify it very simply is this is the lesser of the evil, because evil is everywhere. There's good and evil everywhere. These atrocities that we say, oh my God, it's happening in America. It's happening everywhere. America just happens to be the safest place still. Still, safest place. Still the safest place to go. Still. Yes, we could throw out the data and the statistics and all those things. We could do all that. But, sorry, dude.
I've not been to China yet. My son has. And, but I've been to, many countries in Africa. I've been to many countries in Europe. I've been to many countries in South America. And I would say what stands out in America is that, one, because America has the largest military presence and the strongest military, it also has the strongest economy, and it's also the world's reserve currency. That's what makes America attractive for other people to come. The reason they come to America is because there's an opportunity through capitalism for them to take an idea, be innovative and hardworking, and make that money work for them. According to the CDC, adults aged 65 and older, there are 14 million people who report falling each year. Falling is the number one predictor of shorter lifespan. And because what Chris talked about, when you get those fractures in your hip and now you start to lose mobility and then you start to lose the ability to use your muscles, then what happens is there becomes this negative cascading effect. If you have good balance and you have good posture and you have good muscle strength, you are in a position to uniquely set yourself up for longer life and a higher quality of life while you're living, and you significantly reduce chronic disease.
Welcome to the Family Office, planning for the people who matter most.
I'm going to do it all, because it's a drive. It's a short drive, and also we haven't been anywhere in a minute. The kids want to go somewhere, and it's always good to just kind of do offsite and get away and not have to deal with anything. And then, house cleaner will come on Friday right after Thanksgiving, and then everyone will get home from some other house. Right. This is why wealthy people have estates and go places, because then when you get back to when we get back on the first, everything will be clean and we won't have to do anything.
Yes.
You know what
Absolutely.
I mean?
Oh yeah.
It's like kind of almost like going from hotel to hotel so it's definitely a really good experience because, and that's not to say that we always entertained in the house, you probably, that, I mean, given where we've came from, the businesses that we were in, but and I remember always entertaining even before, right. Just as a young child, my family would entertain a lot, and then I would do that, and then my wife's Mexican, obviously, so there's always going to parties at the house. But I don't think you can ever really enjoy yourself when you're hosting something at your house, because it's just so much. And then so going to a different house that's yours, whether you rent it, you arbitrage the enjoyment, or you actually own it, it's like your summer house or not, it's enjoyable because you don't have to deal with all that other stuff, the normal life stuff. Right? You could just go in there and enjoy it. You could just really turn your brain off and just kind of just do really what I think. Anyways, I remember when I used to work corporate America, once the Thanksgiving week hit, like today, like this Monday, that was it. I was gone for the rest of the year. I was done for the rest of the year. I didn't work for the year. I saved my PTO. I saved my 4 or 5 weeks of PTO for the year, and I spent it all at the end of the year. And
I think this is a really good time for planning too. I was having a conversation with the gentleman who is he has a consulting business, and he does like leadership consulting. And he actually used to be a pastor and run, a pretty nice sized church, and decided to walk away from that, which is very, very rare, especially, when you have that as your profession, because it's different than a corporate profession, because it's more in alignment with the calling. And he definitely has the gift. His father was a pastor. And so for him, he essentially followed in his father's footsteps, but decided to walk away and do something different. He caught a lot of flack for it. So we had good numbers of conversations, but he's in transition right now, because he's actually taking his business and really establishing, higher end corporate clients and things like that. And so, you talked about traveling and going to New Orleans and just getting a different environment. I think it's always good, especially as a person who is goal oriented, that, to really be in a position to say, you know what, I need to get away. I need to change my environment. I need to be in a place where there's no distractions. There's no kids running around in the background. There's none of this stuff. So you can just get away and be clear. Right. And so, I had that conversation with him. I said, listen, have you really had a chance? Because it sounds like, based on your feedback, the last time that you were really clear is when you had a chance to just be at the beach and be alone and be by yourself and change your environment. And so I think, it's really a good time, especially during the holidays with Christmas coming up and Thanksgiving coming up, just to get away from it all and really come back and hit the road running, especially Q1 is around the corner.
Yeah. And that I think is a really good point too, though, just for anybody, even if you don't have a business and you just have a regular W-2, you're in the W-2 channel, income production or revenue making, whatever you want to call it, your work. You have a W-2. I just think that this is such a great time of year because everything is slow this time of year, like everything, regardless. And I say that confidently because I know some people will go, oh, it's only slow for certain people.
Well, retail is not, but yes, I know exactly what you mean.
Correct. But even though if obviously you work retail and stuff but I remember, even when I was, in a sales, not sales, I wasn't in sales, but I worked at a company that I saw I was heavily involved in the sales because I did IT. So I saw salespeople. But even at this time, it was slow. Even when I worked, in the W-2 as a W-2 employee in my early 20s and my 20s, my mid 20s, I still was slow this time of year. It was slow, but that gives you a good time gives you a good opportunity to really, like I said, if you're a business owner, you're strategizing, you're doing business planning, you're figuring out what your growth is, what your budget, where you're going to be in the next year. But then if you're a W-2 person, you're also planning. You're okay. What do I want to stay at this career, this job this year? Do I want to make a move? Do I want to take on a second job or a second career? Do I want to build a side hustle this year? Do I want to increase my savings, my personal development plan? Am I actually going to really get into the gym this year? Am I going to work on my mental health this year? There's so many different things, and that helps. I think, at least it did for me in my experience, is it helped with the anxiety of the beginning of the year because the end of the year is great because it's almost like it's the ultimate weekend feeling that people get. Like, oh my God, like, the weekend feeling is great. You're like, yeah, right? Which is pretty much, I don't have anything to do or responsibilities that are going to call me or bug me tomorrow. So therefore today I'm going to really be relaxed. I don't know if anyone else knows what I'm talking about, but I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, Len.
Oh yeah.
Right? So the end of the year is like the ultimate weekend feeling, but then you have the ultimate weekend crash, which is the beginning of the year. And you're like, oh my God, right? So it's like the beginning of the year is the ultimate Monday experience. So for those who have the Monday weekend type of whatever you call that cliche, to eliminate that and just make it regular, you just pre-plan and you actually, so when you actually know where you're going or you have a plan or case in point, we have a map, you feel confident. So if you want to hack yourself and to have that confidence, then prepare now, and I always find that you want to put stuff off like that because you're like, I just want to cut loose, but just take, an hour or two every day throughout the month of December or the first 3 weeks of December and just really just focus on it because you have extra time. I mean, that's just kind of it's kind of where I'm at right now in life, just to kind of see that. You see people like Elon Musk or Bill Gates or whoever you want to talk, throw in that pool, and they just go and read for 3 or 4 weeks somewhere by themselves and just kind of self-develop. So I think it's essential if you ultimately want to get to the next level and you don't want to find yourself falling behind in the world, right? And I guess that's the thing. If I could tell my younger self, I'd say move faster, younger. Yeah, that's the biggest advice I would give myself is just move faster because
and be intentional. Because I think a lot of times what happens is we get these routines and then we fall into these habits. Habits or routines are good, but it's important to continue to reinvent yourself, reinvent your strategy, reassess if what you're doing is working, and use data and feedback loops to make sure that you're not just falling behind. Because while you're keeping the same pace, if the world around you is getting faster, you're essentially running slower. And so this is really a good time to take a logical assessment of all of that. And so I think, to your point, the turn of the year going from 25 to 26, especially now with all of the tools that we have available to us because of AI, we can really take some time to really do a deep dive. And that's really what I'm doing with my business. I'm taking a deep dive into it to see, okay, what kind of tools can we integrate? What type of tools that we're using right now should we go ahead and eliminate? And how can we assimilate new ideas and people potentially to bring on board to help us get where we want to even faster? And so this is a really, really good time to do that. And speaking of really good times, man, for the news cycle and all of the events that are going on, man, there's a lot going on, man. So I don't even know where you want to start. I mean, Trump and Mamdani had a really interesting conversation at the White House.
I just want to know if there's like a bromance going on right now. Like I'm looking at this and I'm going, JD Vance has got to be a little jealous or envious, because I'm like, then I watched it and I went, Trump is a genius. He's just such a freaking marketing genius. He's like, how I am going to get what I want and stick it to everybody by using this guy in New York to push the same agenda, because who doesn't want cheaper rents? Who doesn't want to build? Like, these are all hallmarks. I'm just so, I can say, Len, I'm surprised, but I'm not surprised. I just am like, I'm going, is this really happening right now? But then I went, yeah, Trump was like, Trump is just such an opportunist that it just kind of, I know why people get sick, because they go, how did he do it? Like, how did he spin that? I don't know. There's definitely, I don't want to say there's a bromance thing, but it was definitely, all that aside, because it was pretty funny.
What did you expect to see that happened that didn't? Like, what was the disconnect between what you anticipated and what you actually saw?
I just think that it was too authentic to say it wasn't real.
Okay.
It was authentic. Like, it was way too, it's not going to say it was way too easy, but it was easy and it was authentic. I just didn't think it was going to be a productive meeting, but it was ultimately a very productive meeting. And not so much where Trump came out and said it was a productive meeting. You had major left-leaning or right-leaning media outlets that actually came out and also said it was productive, right? I mean, unless I'm missing something, I don't know. So that to me is a shocker. But I also look at it more deeply and I go, yeah, Trump's going to figure out a way to put development in there, or to develop, because that's really the only way you're going to bring the rent prices down and all this stuff and to make it affordable is you've got to bring cash investments in. You got to bring investment dollars in to drop it. So, but then at the same time, I haven't really corroborated it, but and I was going to talk to you about it because this just happened. Did Jerome Powell say that the tariffs are not impacting inflation? I heard something or saw something that came out that way, and that is kind of like leading to the fact that there's going to be rate cuts in December.
I have not heard specifically about the connection between the tariffs and the rate cuts specifically. I do anticipate that the rate cuts will happen, but I haven't heard Powell speak on that, not in the last week or so.
But Secretary Bessent just came out and confirmed, which is interesting. I think you might find this funny. Is this the strategy here, right? Is this a saving grace? But Secretary Bessent actually just came out and confirmed that people are going to get tariff checks. They are going to get $2,000 tariff checks.
$2,000 checks? How do you?
Yes, they are coming.
How do you feel about that? What are your thoughts about that?
Okay. Here, ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, I think that the American people should be getting those because it's kind of almost like an investment return. Because ultimately, everyone's supposed to own this country, right? Like, this land is my land, this land is your land, right? So ultimately, we own the profits of the country. So if there are profits of the country, why shouldn't those profits come back to the people of America? So if it is a legitimate tariff profit and it's not manipulated in some way, like it's legitimate on a balance sheet, like, hey, America sold this and made a profit, and because of your income level, you're entitled to that profit. I think that that's a great idea. I think it's absolutely phenomenal.
I 100% believe that if a Democrat were in office and the same exact things would happen, I think you'd say it was a terrible idea because
I wouldn't.
Yes, you would, Chris.
Look, here's why I say it's good, because you can feel good. I could feel good about getting that type of check because it's not a handout program. It's not a program where it's like I need it because I'm suffering. It's hey, dude, this is. The UAE does it. Like, this is your return of the profit. Like, this is your return of the spoils of the country that you're a citizen of.
And there's such a much smaller population. Because, okay, look, this is how I look at it. If you look at the grand scheme of things, each person with $2,000 in their hands, what's going to happen? They're just going to go out and spend it on stupid stuff. There's going to be some that invested and maybe start a little small business. There may be some that invested and get a little cash back return. Some are going to pay down debt, but most are going to consume. And the consumption is good on a micro scale because of the fact that, they're going to probably patronize local businesses. But what about let's assume, because first of all, I don't believe in the fact that the tariffs has created this land, this whole large amount, this windfall. Yes, this windfall of money.
When we see the budget, we'll know, right? I mean, yes.
We'll see it. I just think it's smoke and mirrors. I think the idea of $2,000 though is a bad idea because I think that money would be better served. Let's just assume that it was an actual windfall and it was profits that were coming back to the government, so on and so forth. I think that money would be better spent to reduce the deficit, to pay down, some of it, or use it collectively for other types of programs that benefited the greater good. When I say the greater good, because 2,000 in the hands of many is not necessarily as beneficial as, let's say, billions of dollars going focused towards one thing to benefit people more long term. So like, for example, over the weeks we've talked about, let's say infrastructure issues, because the United States being a first world country and the technological behemoth that we have some major infrastructure deficits, and that money could be better spent there. So I just think, first of all, I don't believe that money is real because, the tariffs, I've always said, is a good concept if applied properly. I just don't think that the tariffs have been applied properly. And a lot of us are actually the ones that are spending extra money because of the tariffs anyway. So it's like, you're spending more on everyday goods and services to get $2,000 to spend on more expensive everyday goods and services. I just don't think that it's an effective approach.
Well, I think they're real, and I think the balance sheet will show it, just simply because I just can't believe that you could lie that big about something, but things have been lied about bigger than that. So we'll leave it at that. I'll be surprised. I think you'll be surprised if it's real, and I will be surprised if it's not real. So at that point, the biggest issue I have is that I don't think that I would trust the American consumer or the average American or whatever you want to call it. I hate when you have to say like the average American or whatever. I'm just going to say I would trust any American to spend that $2,000 before I trust any government to spend that money. And that's the problem I have, because you could look at California. California's infrastructure sucks, but California has the biggest tax that they're supposed to collect on infrastructure called the gas tax, 75%, 80% of every dollar.
95 cents per gallon.
Oh, now it's 95. See, when I left, it was 75. So, so let's just say $1, because that's really what it is. So every dollar, and what is gas? $5 and $6 a gallon in California right now?
It's between $4.30 and $5.
Okay, so let's say it's $4.50 a gallon. So that means literally, right? What is it? $1 for every gallon? Like, that's crazy, right? So $1 for that price is going into that fund, but yet the infrastructure sucks. Furthermore, and I hate to pick on California, but they just make it so easy. They lost $20 billion over the last 5 years of where that money was earmarked for homelessness. But the homeless problem has gotten worse, and they don't even know where the money is at. So I don't trust. That's the problem I have, Len. Yes, I think that money could be responsibly spent elsewhere, but I think that it's trickle up economics in this case. But that if you let that money go out into the free market and you let Americans spend that money, you're ultimately going to reduce the debt faster because you're going to have better GDP growth. I think that's the way it works to me, is if we have more money in this economy and people are buying and spending, then ultimately GDP grows, corporate tax revenue grows, which is ultimately the best source of revenue, corporate tax revenue, right? And capital gains tax revenue. And that type of stuff comes into the system. You're going to see that debt lower versus giving it to a bureaucrat to spend it on something that's going to not be spent. And Doge taught us that. The one thing that Doge showed us was we spend a lot on pork belly shit.
Yeah.
And for the audience that doesn't know that, that's an old school term from the 90s when they used to call trash politics, that people would spend $500 on a hammer. That's called pork belly spending. We do that. So I just don't trust money in the hands of the government, just like the founders didn't trust money in the hands of the government. And we can't control the supply. The source of supply and the source of creation can never go to a government. The supply control can never go there, because the government can't manage anything. It just doesn't know how, because at its heart, the natural ways or physics or whatever you want to call it, rules or operating parameters of the universe state that anytime a government gets involved, then it screws up. And it's not because the government wasn't created right. It's because the government is always ran by people, and virtues and human nature doesn't change. So
okay. No, I definitely can understand. Okay. So one thing I want to correct myself, gas tax is 61 cents, not 95 in California.
So still
high.
expensive. So
still high. Yeah.
Why we have infrastructure problems in the California is beyond me, with the amount of money that's earmarked for transportation in that state.
I agree.
Now, not saying it's all bad.
Okay, I wanted to throw another idea towards as it relates to if this tariff money is going to be distributed. What are your thoughts about the idea of the federal government taking that money and distributing to states, and then the states then work with their electorate to decide how that money's spent? So maybe there's a special election, or include that in the midterm election ballot and say, hey, Texas has X billion dollars to spend, let's take a call for proposals or ideas or things like that. Reach out to your representative. And, I know it'd be a lot more complex, but I just think ultimately that money would be better spent with better, with each state getting its own chance. What are your thoughts about that? That's just a thought that came to my head.
Yeah, I like that idea. And immediately when I hear that, to me, it pops my head. I said, cool, give me an election at the end of the year to not take FICA for me, or SS tax for me. In lieu of that, hey, at your end of it, you go, hey, congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. You're married based on your last year. You guys each get a $4,000 tariff refund on your credit. Get the Democrats shut down the government for tax exemptions or tax refunds or tax breaks on Obamacare. Why did they go in there and constructively talk about that? Hey, Trump, you said call Trump out call him out. Put your money where your mouth is. You put your money where your mouth's at, Trump. You say your secretary said $2,000 tariff checks are coming. Great. We don't want you to withhold, or we don't care about the breaks for affordable health care anymore. We want that money now instead diverted to that now. Awesome. See, that's the thing. Why didn't they pull that card? So yeah, I'd rather have at the end of the year have an option to say, hey, cool, you have a $5,000, $6,000 tariff credit. What do you want to do? I don't know FICA this year. No, for people who are self-employed, no, a portion of your self-employment tax. Let them do an IRA deduction if they don't have an IRA deduction. I think then you're talking. Now you're talking, because now you can build tax deductions or tax incentives in there and for the consumer to have choices with their profit that they should be getting from the country, the corporate states of America, the United Corporate States of America. Right?
Yeah. I just think it's just, putting money from one hand to the other, because we're the ones that's paying extra, not the other countries. And that's the whole bill of goods that's being sold. We're paying. I don't
think so. I think it flips. I think it flips eventually. I think it flips because it's going to come round robin, because they can no longer use the America to use as a cheap import or a cheap carry trade. They can't use it anymore for that they can't use it anymore like that. They can't take advantage and currency manipulate with the tariff. That creates that too for them now.
Okay.
China's been doing that for decades. They've been currency manipulating.
I think
their currency on purpose.
Yes, and that's true. I just think that your argument would definitely be super solid if manufacturing were to come back to the United States. And we've had conversations about that in previous conversations, so I don't want to rehash that. But there's 1,001 different ways that money can be distributed.
Yeah, I just don't think manufacturing comes back the way we think it. I think
No, it's not.
comes back in a different way. Chip foundry, chip manufacture, super AI production, advanced model learning, teaching, all of these things. Like, there's a ton of stuff, right? But again, here's a good.
That means a lot of blue collar Americans are going to be, left having to figure out how to adjust what they do. And, I think that's just a natural
I don't think so. I don't think so, because if we figure out how to get into orbit, high Earth orbit, and I know this can kind of go a little fringe, but we're there. We're right there. If we figure out how to produce nuclear energy in high Earth orbit, right? We figure out how to recycle off the planet. We figure out how to do those things. You're talking about massive amounts of opportunities in employment, and it's not. I think the whole system's going to change. I don't even think people are going to really be employed anymore. I think it's just going to change vastly. It's going to change. What's interesting, Len, is what makes me sad, Len, is I don't think you and I are going to be around long enough probably to see a full change. But that change, we are living at the beginning decades of of what it was like with the Industrial Revolution. I think, anyways.
I think it'll be
that point.
And I think it'll be interesting to see how all of the transition takes place. But you're talking about the tariffs right now. I mean, you and I are fairly young. We're not in our 80s or even 70s. We're not even in our 60s. And so when you're talking about people being taxed right now and just this whole issue about affordability, even Trump's been talking about affordability. You go to the gas station, you go to the grocery store, you go out and eat. It's a lot more expensive. And then when you're looking at the housing market is much more difficult to break into if you're a Gen Z and a Gen Alpha. So those folks don't have 30 and 40 years to wait for this industrial revolution 2.0 type of a change. There needs to be some way for folks to be able to survive and to stop this runaway freight train of costs. And so, I think we've got to solve that problem.
Yeah,
soon.
and that's the big challenge right now. That's the big elephant in the room that nobody really wants to talk about is that, okay, the U.S. has had, 38 trillion in debt, right? Mm-hmm. And most countries follow right behind us. Most countries follow right behind us. Okay, no one has ever dealt with that type of problem. No one's ever gotten themselves out of that. Like, we can, unless I'm wrong, I don't know, Len, we're having this conversation in real time. Can anybody raise their hand right now in the room on the planet Earth and say, yeah, I've confidently dealt with 38 trillion. I've paid $338 trillion worth of debt back. Has anyone said that? Has anyone ever done that?
Nobody's ever been that deep in debt. But,
right.
But I see where you're going.
How do you get out of it, right? So that's where a lot of people start going right now, Bitcoin is, you're gonna have to rebate. You're gonna have to completely change the currency and all those things. That's the only way you could. Legacy debt. That was legacy debt. The United States has $37 trillion worth of legacy debt. What's legacy debt? Fiat debt. Right, but now we're on the Bitcoin, and I'm just saying Bitcoin because that name gets thrown out there the most, mm-hmm. Right? How much debt? No Bitcoin debt though, but the U.S. has $37 trillion worth of fiat debt. Like, how do you're going to see that convergence? I think you're going to have to see some type of convergence, and that's why I think because how long inflation went up by 0.8%. How mm-hmm. long have we been in an inflationary period, Len? Is this the longest inflationary period? Because how do you get out of this? And I was saying this to Mary, I think 24 hours ago, or maybe it was today. We were driving somewhere. I said, "This is it now. This is we're never going back. Like, this is the new normal now. This is the new baseline now, based on where we're at. Like, prices are never going back down ever again."
Prices have never gone down historically. I mean, because if you look at it historically, when you look at cost of living adjustment, which is lockstep with the inflation rate, it's typically 2% per year. And so costs have always gone up. I mean, if you go back and look at McDonald's burgers now versus back in the 50s, housing, cars, everything, nothing right. goes down. It's just the rate of acceleration slowing down commensurate to income. And so So, there's a lot that you said to unpack. One, when you talk about the amount of national debt we have, the one thing that happens is what's different is that the United States, the dollar is the world's currency, the world's reserve currency. So because it's the world's reserve currency, what the feds do and what the U.S. government does is they're looking to print money out of it. But then what that does is it debases the currency. And that happened that happened during the Roman era, that happened during the German era, that happened, with the English, and happened, it happened over and over and
It's
over.
It's happened.
And it's happening right now.
It's happening now.
And so the only way, and you talked about this a couple of weeks ago, the only way to get out of that is to be more productive, faster than the debasement. And you've got to stop debasing the currency. And in order to do that, some way we've got to start decelerating the amount in which inflation goes up relative to income. And I think, looking at the gold standard, that's not a realistic answer because there's not enough currency to stay with the amount of GDP that exists throughout the world. So you can't have a gold standard anymore. And so I think crypto is going to play a role, but I think hopefully, you start to look at other currencies, starting to, get into a place where it's not going as, rapidly declining. And so I say all of that to say, Chris, that we really, really need to take a look at what's going on economically. We need to look at what's going on in terms of our production. We need to look at what's going on in terms of our ability to not continue to debase the currency just by printing more and more. And so, I'm really concerned.
And it's interesting what you just said about how, we're not that old, right? Because we're not. We're not. So just this morning when I was doing business planning and structuring, what I'm doing is putting everything together for a 25% annual income growth. So I want to scale my income by 25% growth every year over the next 10 years. Because I know there's absolutely no way. 25% is a baseline for me. I mean, because there's just no way if for me in my mind, if I'm not growing my income by 25% every year, there's just no way with my kids and what I have, there's absolutely no way. So, and I put it through three different chatbots. I put it through ChatGPT, I put it through Grok, and I put it through Anthropic. I put it through all of those. Which I want to say Anthropic's is it's Claude. I want to say it was Claude.
Okay.
So I put through all those, and every single one of them, you know what they said? This is not achievable with a traditional W-2 income.
It's not. Absolutely.
It's not achievable.
No.
It's not achievable.
25% would take you 10 to 15 years.
Right. So and when you look at the dollar, there's a chart, you could look it up. If you look at the dollar compared to the S&P 500, and you look at the dollar when the dollar was made a fiat currency, right? Versus the S&P at the same time period, the charts are completely inverted. The S&P is like up 100 over 100%, and the dollar's down. So the dollar has been losing its value. It's been inflating down or inflating up, or however it's said properly, since it's been created. And that's the nature of all or any fiat. That's always the nature of any and all fiats, is that it's going to do that. So I think that, crypto is going to be that. Right now, it seems like it's the only viable thing that you could to use to get out of that. And then and again, this is just me thinking, but you could potentially live in a world where you have fiat, where you have legacy fiat debt versus new debt. And the whole world changes, and who knows? But to me, the biggest issue that I have is that I just wish politicians would stop saying that they could fix it, because they can't. And that's what kills it more and just kind of regulates it more. But going back, I mean, and going back to it, Len, just to switch a little bit to it, is, a lot of people are saying there is a bubble right now. And I know in staying in the spirit of finance, a lot of people are saying there's a bubble. Look, NVIDIA is if you go back and you blink your eyes and you look at the dot-com bubble, because obviously I don't want to talk about real estate because real estate was real estate. But if you look at a dot-com bubble and you look at a tech bubble, because these are two in the same wheelhouse, you have AI, which is tech. The Cisco was that company, right? Back in the day. NVIDIA is like, I don't know, what is NVIDIA? NVIDIA is like I think it's like 46% or something like that. It's GDP, it's valuation over its earnings. But they released their earnings call last week. It was a smashing success. They're killing it still. It didn't crash the market like everybody. There was a little bit of pullback, but again, the markets are back up a little bit, or back up. Bitcoin's going to go over 90,000. I think it's like at 89, 89. It almost went under 80,000, or it might have dipped below. I can't remember. But what do you think that outlook looks like for is there an AI bubble? Are we going to see a little bit of are we going to see a pop? Is it going to be as huge? Michael Berry's still shorting the crap out of everything and still selling and sell everything. We didn't see, anything crazy happen, but still, this is the time. This is the week. If something weird's going to happen, it could happen this week or the first week of December. What are your thoughts on that? Where are you at with that?
So I think we are in an AI bubble, but I think, so one of the things that Michael Berry said is, he said, it's not necessarily because of the tech inefficiencies. It's because of the emotions attached to the value of those companies. And so whenever public sentiment is exuberant, you need to have the opposite approach, because we tend to overinflate things when they're good, and we tend to overcorrect when things are bad. When you look at the stock market, when it trends up, it goes up quickly, but then when sentiment changes, it goes down exponentially faster. And so in the case of NVIDIA, when you look at Palantir, there's almost this closed loop in which the companies feed each other. And so there's this fake feedback loop between the different AI companies and NVIDIA. And so what could potentially happen is you have all of this hysteria and hype and over exuberance about what AI is doing. Eventually those chickens are going to come home to roost if that day is going to happen. And if that day does happen, what's going to happen is you're going to have all of these, like, for example, Palantir, they're really big on government contracts. And so because they have all of these government contracts, what happens when there's no need for that number of AI chips, those chips are just going to sit around, and because they're not productive, they're not going to be sold at the same level. And when earnings come in and the numbers go down, people are going to rush away from it to say, you know what, let me hold off for a while. So I believe that overall AI technology, the United States is on the forefront in the world. But I think what's going to happen is that Michael Burry is going to turn out to be right. And I believe there's going to be a massive selling off of AI stocks. I just don't think it's going to happen this year. I think it's going to be next year, sometime during 2026.
I think what you're going to have is somewhere along the lines. I don't think it's going to be as massive, but what I do think you're going to see is, and I have seen that often, where you see, and there's a lot of them in there. You got OpenAI in there, Microsoft, Oracle, TMC. You got all the Broadcom. You got all these guys that are feeding each other, right? Hey, I buy from you, you buy from me. I'll invest in you. Boom, 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 boom. Right, and they're all going back and forth. I mean, if you didn't have AI on the S&P, you wouldn't have the year that you had, right?
No
doubt.
You
just wouldn't. I mean, that's what's driving the markets right now. That's completely. The scary thing is that that's the only thing really that's driving the markets right now is all that, right? So whenever there's something all in one basket like that, that's a very scary situation. But what I do think you're going to see is you're going to see a consolidation, and you're going to see a lot of absorption, and then we'll come out of it with the players who are really the players in the space.
I agree.
But I think that AI is really gonna I don't think that anyone really knows yet how to apply it. I think obviously the cost saving is like the number one thing. Everyone's, oh my God, productivity, cost saving. But I think realistically right now, once people understand where it's going to go, how it's going to implement, how it's going to scale in regular business, are we going to put people out? Also, too, all these states are going to release AI regulation to make sure people don't, lose their jobs and things like that. Like, you're going to see this stuff. You're going to see No Robots Act of 2019. That's my age. Right? No Robot Act, the Anti-Robot Human Act of 2050 or 2045. No human's job shall be replaced by a robot. You're going to see legislation like that, probably. So I just think that it's going to be a lot. I think the brakes will come on, so that you don't see that crash, that human crash of where do people work now? How do people make money now? How does this machine work because this machine hasn't really changed in a long time. This is a very old machine that we're running right now. The machine of the economics of the world, the how it works, it's a very old machine. So to completely change it that way, it would be such a shock. It'd be like losing 100 pounds in one day. Even if you put the best AI computer in there, you're going to shock the crap out of the system, because ultimately, what are you going to do if you fire everybody and no one has a job? What are we going to do? I get it, Bill Gates, and I don't want to mention, never mind, I don't want to say it. I just don't want to say it. I don't want to go down that hole, I'll say it this way. Chris. Yeah, I don't want to say it, because realistically, ultimately, what are you going to do? What could you do? All right, let's play devil's advocate for a minute. Let's assume tomorrow AI is an astounding success and 70% of the American workforce or worldwide no longer has to have a job. What do we do? Everything would crash. The AI companies that need your money so that you can scroll on the AI and use the AI or whatever, or buy the products that the AI is making ABC company more efficient to make. I can't go buy the widget anymore because I don't have a job.
Yeah,
I can't buy a house anymore because I don't have a job.
You said earlier, man, you talked about universal basic income. That's the panacea that they're talking about.
That I think, and that it goes in the way of, again, that you're gonna ultimately, if you think vastly into the future. And again, I don't know anything, but ultimately, as of right now, my brain automatically defaults to that. Going, well, eventually, we're going to get to a point where money no longer. It doesn't. There's just so much abundance in the universe, and eventually, it becomes so efficient to harvest and produce such that money is obsolete now. Trade is obsolete now because anybody can, like the Jetsons, anybody can buy a food Araka cycle and make a cheeseburger in 2 seconds. Anybody can do that. So, honey, can you pick up? So when you make your order today, can you please make sure that you order some more 80-20 grass-fed amino acids so that we can produce more hamburgers? So we can grow hamburgers tomorrow? You won't need to grow cows anymore. You'll just grow the meat. So organically. Yeah. Organically. You'll get to that point.
Well, I think I'm typically an optimistic person, but in this case, I don't have that same degree of optimism you have.
You're doom and gloom about the technology revolution and all that stuff. Mary's the same way. She doesn't believe in it. It's going to work out.
I think it's going to increase efficiencies, but I think human nature is to always defer to greed and hoarding. And I think that as we get more opportunities for fewer people to have a larger concentration of wealth, I think people naturally will trend toward that. I think the only way to really avoid that is for people to come together and really have a pluralistic approach as to what the future may look like. Because to your point earlier, we don't know what type of new jobs are going to be created because it's not on our radar yet. I believe, because if you look at every single transition, when people were growing corn and wheat, and everybody were farmers, when this whole idea of the Industrial Revolution came about, people were very concerned about what jobs would look like. And, everything transitioned just well and the world got richer. And so if you look at the global trajectory in terms of the quality of living, technology has done nothing but increase the overall improvement of people worldwide. The only concern that I have right now, because that's an optimistic view. And I started off by saying I have a pretty pessimistic view. My pessimism comes from the standpoint that because technology is such a tool that can be used to concentrate power and influence and the control of resources from the many to the few, you need fewer people to do even more work productively, that people have the ability to hoard those resources. And so I hope that we'll take a collective approach and really understand that if you have a small number of people who are abundantly wealthy and the overwhelming majority of masses are upset and they're broke, you're not going to live in peace anyway, because when people get to a point, I think there was a study that showed that once you get to a point where more than 30% of your income is being spent just on food and sustenance, that's when stability starts to break down. And I think, the only way to maintain that type of stability is to make sure that people have some way of taking care of themselves and taking care of their basic needs. So the only way, to close my point, that I really see out of it, to try to piggyback on your optimism, is that if good means of production are so efficient that money becomes irrelevant, it's just a matter that we all have access to whatever we need. And then some other type of hierarchical stratification would differentiate those from having, your home, your food, your shelter, 1 or 2 trips a year, to, overall abundance with your yachts and, your mansions and things like that. I think if we ever get to that point, there will always be some mechanism for stratification. But I hope that there's a point in which money doesn't become, as necessary. But then, I don't want to get biblical or anything like that. But now, you hear a lot more conversations about this whole idea of, this mark that you have to, take on and all of that. So I don't want to talk about any of that stuff, because this is not the setting for that. But anyhow,
I think about it this way too, right? All right. With job creation, right? As you're saying, I'm thinking about this. Could you imagine today? Could you imagine 10 years ago or 20 years ago that everyone could be the opportunity to be a movie star or a journalist or any of the things? I mean, think about what TikTok and YouTube Shorts and Reels and social media platforms like those have done. It's opened up a totally different economy. I mean, throw them all in there now. I mean, so many people make money as influencers. Like, think about it. Influencers didn't exist. Right? Influencers existed in a sense through the traditional channel of what? I got to become famous, become a movie star, and there you get, or an art or a musician, right? Those were influencers. Now, if you got 20,000 people, 2 million people to follow you on Instagram, you're an influencer, which means you could sell product. Mm-hmm. Because if so-and-so sees me with a really cool cup, they're going to pay me for that. So that I see is kind of opening, and I don't want to get too utopian and all that stuff, but realistically, if you think about it, people in a true free market open society where the country is legitimately ran by an elected body that's for the people, by the people, the profits of all the countries should be going to the people. So therefore, taxes should be virtually almost nothing or zero. And therefore, people shouldn't really have to work unless they want to become uber wealthy and create new stuff, because that's the thing. Human invention and human ingenuity is always going to be there. Someone's always going to think of a new way and a new business. So if those people want to still do that, you can. If people like you and I want to strive above and beyond, great. If you just want to live baseline and be an artist and be an influencer and be and live like they did in the Greek Empire, where you just sit around and eat grapes all day long, you could do that. But just know that this is what that standard looks like. The universal standard is this. If you don't want to work and create businesses and figure out how to be more productive in the world, then this is what you get. This is the standard. And you don't get upset about it. And you don't be right about it. You know what I'm saying? And if you want to go above and beyond and you want to go through that pressure and that risk-reward scenario and stress, which is capitalism, which is entrepreneurship, which created everything that we have today, including AI, because of entrepreneurship and free market, then you can go do that. But don't get mad when so-and-so over here gets his basic universal and also started a company and as a result has 10 more million in crypto or fiat or whatever the heck it is, right? That's kind of the way it would go.
Rise. The cream will always rise. And the whole idea of the Pareto principle, 80-20, that is a universal principle regardless. So I agree with you. I think one way, as you were talking, I was riffing in my mind about, okay, how could something like that really become a reality for people? Imagine this. Imagine 3D printers in every house. And all you need is the raw material to be able to produce whatever it is you want. Whether it's a car, you just need rubber and aluminum alloy, whatever. If you wanted to build a house, I don't think, houses always are going to be reliant on wood as much because, you have these plastic fabrications and metallic fabrications that are much more precise. They don't wobble. They're weather resistant. I've seen some technology that's emerging around that. So if every home had some type of 3D printer and then you just make your own goods and then your capacity to acquire goods and services, the only concern that I have right now, because that's an optimistic view. And I started off by saying I have a pretty pessimistic view. My pessimism comes from the standpoint that because technology is such a tool that can be used to concentrate power and influence and the control of resources from the many to the few, you need fewer people to do even more work productively, that people have the ability to hoard those resources.
That direction.
Yeah. I think something like that would certainly be possible. I think we're probably 20 years away from that, but I definitely with my own eyes have seen existing technologies that lend itself to something like that being a reality, regardless of where you live in the world. Because, as long as we have the resources to create it, there's, between 8 and 9 billion people on the planet, but there's probably, there's a fraction of that in terms of the number of households. And so, you have a few billion 3D printers and some community 3D printers and so on and so forth. Now you democratize manufacturing and you've got the ability to create anything you want potentially.
I agree. I absolutely agree. I think we're going to see a lot of new avenues, but again, life is life, and you've got to figure out what to do to hang on, and you got to figure out how to get better and improve. And that's just the world we're in. And you got to be thankful you're lucky you're in America, because they just recently released the statistics. What was this? I was watching something. It's like, do you know African American women are starting more businesses today than any other ethnicity or gender in America today?
I heard that.
Mm-hmm. African American women. So you definitely still are in the best place to weather this, because this transition isn't a country transition. This is a worldly transition. 100%. So I say being in America, you're probably in one of the best situations. But to change gears a little bit, I'm very, very surprised that things have seemed to cooled off a little bit on the Epstein stuff. Okay. Obviously, the bill has passed. They're going to release the files. Marjorie Taylor Greene is stepping down and not running for a re-election, and Trump goes, because you suck, because your poll numbers are crappy, and I'm not on the ticket. I'm going, look at this guy, right? But they're going to release them. They're going to release everything. You're already starting to see some of the higher profile names that are starting to fall down, like Larry Summers. His life is unwinding. You're going to start to see a little bit more. Hakeem Jeffries was in some tumultuous hot water for a little bit, but I think they realized that it wasn't as deep as it was. But still, I think AOC is going to primary challenge him. Someone's going to challenge him. It almost seems like, and would realistically be the next coming up in the old guard, right? I mean, he was kind of an understudy of Schumer and Pelosi and all those guys. So the powers are shifting. The powers that be are shifting a little bit. I don't think again, Epstein stuff might be looking out to be a flop. I don't know. We'll see what happens with it. It might not be sensational. I think I'm sticking to the fact that I think it's a distraction to teach. That I see is kind of opening, and I don't want to get too like utopian and all that stuff, but realistically, if you think about it, people in a true free market open society where the country is legitimately ran by an elected body that's for the people, by the people, the profits of all the countries should be going to the people. So therefore, taxes should be virtually almost nothing or zero. And therefore, people shouldn't really have to work unless they want to become uber wealthy and create new stuff. Because that's the thing. Human invention and human ingenuity is always going to be there. I think you're going to have as big of an impact as everyone thinks they're going to have with these Epstein files. What say you, sir?
Okay. I in the macro, in the big picture, I think you're right, but I think because of a different reason. So what I believe is that when you had the House and Senate pass they ruled on releasing the files.
Whatever it was.
Yeah.
They made up a job for themselves to release information that should have been released anyways. So,
right, exactly.
I mean, it's normal government. Let's make up a job for us to actually do what we already should be doing anyways, which again goes to my point earlier of I don't trust them to spend that money. I trust Johnny down the street to go spend it on some Coca-Cola
so it was called the Epstein Transparency Act, HR 4405. And so when you look at the fact that it was passed, I think there's two phases. The first phase, that was to release the pressure. So people are now saying, okay, we like the fact that Congress decided to release the files. We're not exerting the same amount of pressure because they passed the bill. That gives them 30 days to conspire, to strategize, and to figure out how they're going to move forward. Because once these 30 days pass, because if I'm not mistaken,
that's the curing time to release.
They passed, yes, 30 days. So the bill passed on the 18th. With the House, and I think on the 19th with the Senate. My dates might be off, but I think that's what it is. Okay. So let's just say by the end before Christmas, those files should be released. Now, Pam Bondi has already been in front of the viewing public saying, okay, we're going to release them according to the law. We're going to be, we want to make sure that we protect the identities of the victims. And we also want to be mindful of issues of national security. And so I believe those were the talking points to plant the seeds to suggest that they're not really going to release the files in their entirety. I think they'll release them, but they're going to be redacted significantly because she mentioned the fact that there were over 30,000 files already released. Well, that's just to suggest that they're being transparent and they're being proactive, but 33,000 files that don't tell us anything is really meaningless. And so for her to put weight on guns, posters, cars, anything you want.
It's unbelievable.
If you can imagine it, a 3D printer can print it. And
it is unbelievable.
Machine parts, everything. Yeah. I think something like that would certainly be possible. I think we're probably 20 years away from that, but I definitely with my own eyes have seen existing technologies that lend itself to, or they've released the files, but one piece of paper has, 3 names on it that's not redacted, or 3 pieces of information that's totally inconsequential. And so I just think that we're not really ultimately going to get what we're looking for, which is who are the high people in high places and powerful, influential people that were pedophiles and raped and victimized. Oops, they are word. I don't want us to be, taken off of YouTube, but who hurt these young ladies. And so anyway,
abused.
Yes.
Mentally, physically,
mentally, emotionally, all of those. Yes. So I don't think we'll ever get to those names, because I think these 30 days, they'll be able to cover the wagons and then figure out a way to get around it. That's what I believe is going to happen. And it's really sad, because when you have the same people originally saying they were going to release the files, we have the files right here, we're ready to release them, and then something happens between that day and now, especially for Pam Bondi to do a complete 180, it's very, very troubling, because it does not look like transparency at all. It looks like a big cover up.
Well, here's the thing. What Justice Department collected all that information? Wasn't it Trump's? Isn't he the one? Isn't it his Justice Department that got all that information, that convicted him in 2018, whatever it was? So that just is further strange to me. Like,
yeah,
they
exactly.
already know what's in that shit.
They
already know. It's their info. It's their stuff. It happened with the Trump administration. The first administration is when they collected all the Epstein files. Mm-hmm. So they already knew what was in that stuff. That's why I'm saying, like, I can't. They used it as a charade. Man, it's just.
I just think that some nefarious players.
What a crappy. We're never going to find out the truth. We're never going to know the truth ever. Mm-hmm. It's so jacked up now at this point that you can't believe anything, whether it's real or not now at this point. Mm-hmm. It's so jacked up. It's so wishy-washy, and it's so money laundered that you don't even know.
That's right. So that's a very good analogy.
It's so it's literally. We're never gonna know. We're never gonna know.
So how do you feel about that? Okay, so because, like, on the one hand, I hear you say it a lot, America's the greatest country in the history of the world. We're so lucky to be Americans, and, all of this, like, on the one hand, you have, all of these superlatives about this country. But then on the other hand, you have all of this muck and just nefarious, underhanded activity that takes place, that's like this clandestine, behind the veil stuff that's concealed away from us. How do you reconcile those two perspectives for you?
I reconcile it very simply. I think people take a very ignorant approach when they get up on a soapbox and say, "Oh my God, America should be more like this, and this is how so and so does it here," and and we start comparing each other. I think it's very ignorant when we do that, because we're human beings just like they're human beings, right? We're human beings just like they're human beings. I'm sorry, but the facts are the facts, and America has only had one revolution. One. All these other countries that talk trash and say these things, and all these countries, actually, I shouldn't say it that way. All these other countries where people in this country go, well, we should go here because they do it so much better, and there's so much this. So let's go to some other countries where they've had revolutions as soon as 50 years ago, 20 years ago, that you think are so much better. Like Ukraine, oh my God, then go there. France, then go there. UK, then go there. Because in the UK, you have Sharia law courts now. In London. So then go there. Mm-hmm. Cuba, then go there. China, then go there. Go. Because if you're gay, you'll get thrown off a building. You can't own property in those countries. If you're a woman, you got to wear a burqa. Or you don't have the amount of rights you have in America that you have in a different country. So the way I justify it very simply is this is the lesser of the evil. Because evil is everywhere. There's good and evil everywhere. These atrocities that we say, oh my God, it's happening in America. It's happening everywhere. America just happens to be the safest place still. Still, safest place. Still the safest place to go. Still. Yes, we could throw out the data and the statistics and all those things. We could do all that. But, sorry, dude. It's this lesser of the evils here. You have more freedoms here per capita than you do. You have more freedoms here globally than anywhere else in the world. It's exactly why you don't see people protest and organize the way you'd see it in America, because you can't. I would love to see a protest like No Kings that happened recently, because everyone was begging Trump and saying he was a king, but then all of a sudden they were begging the king to release the SNAP benefits because he's a king, right? He's a king, right? No kings, but yet we're going to cry to the king to release the food money. No Congress had to do that, but there's no kings, right? So ignorant in that protest. That's why No Kings is so ignorant, because it was, he's a king, but yet he's a king that can release the money, but yet you give him the power to release the money. Power of the purse is with Congress, not the king, right? So when you look at that and you see those perspectives, this doesn't happen anywhere else. America is still the guiding light. So it's the lesser of the two evils, because if you look at every other country, I would love to see a No Kings protest happen in China. I'd love to see what Xi Jinping would do to a No Kings protest in China. Dead on arrival. Dead. Actually, you wouldn't even think about doing it, because in the back of your mind, you still think China's the best thing because you grew up that way through the Chinese school system. Just like they do in Japan, just like they do in Afghanistan, just like they do everywhere. See, in the United States, you've got weirdos now that want to indoctrinate people to do things, right? And I don't want to get on a soapbox or anything. And that was a long answer, a simple answer. Len. It's very simple. It's still the lesser of the evils reside here in America. I feel in my heart.
Okay, and I asked you to tell me from your perspective, because I think that you have a very optimistic. I think you have a very optimistic perspective of the country, and this I don't want to come across like I don't believe that America is a great country.
No, you're playing devil's advocate.
You do. Well, what I'm saying is, okay, when I've traveled. I've traveled longer than you have, just because by the mere fact that I'm older than you, right? And so a lot of the places I've gone, I've stayed for long periods of time, and I've had the opportunity to travel back multiple times. And so the first time I would sometimes have a rose-colored glass perspective of the place, because you just see, the sights, and you see the travel places, the places where the tourists go and things like that. And then when you go subsequent times, then you have more of an opportunity to, read the local papers and, get a sense of the local politics and things like that. I have not been to China yet. My son has. And, but I've been to, many countries in Africa. I've been to many countries in Europe. I've been to many countries in South America. And I would say what stands out in America is that, one, because America has the largest military presence and the strongest military, it also has the strongest economy, and it's also the world's reserve currency. That's what makes America attractive for other people to come. The reason they come to America is because there's an opportunity through capitalism for them to take an idea, be innovative and hardworking, and make that money work for them. I've seen other countries, particularly in Europe and in South America, and also in Africa to a certain degree, of being able to address your issues and concerns with the government without direct repercussion. Now, if you start to, bomb buildings and burn things down, then of course you're going to suffer a consequence. That's no different than here in America. But there are places where you can be critical of the government without fear of being killed. And so I think there are other places in the world that are great places to live. I'm not necessarily saying that it's a better alternative to America necessarily, depending upon where you are in your life. Let me explain.
Right.
If I have made my money here in America and I have enough wealth to sustain me for the rest of my life, and I still have access to that capital, there are other places in the world that are very pleasant to live. Like Countries like Georgia are pleasant to live. Portugal, Australia. When you look at South America, Argentina, Uruguay. When you look in Europe, like, places like Spain, like I already mentioned Portugal. In Africa, Tanzania, South Africa, Ghana. There's lots of places throughout the world you can live a comfortable life. The cost of living is much less. You can, if you desire to live in a tropical area, you have that. If you have a desire to have different people, be your driver or clean your home and all you have access to those things at a much cheaper rate. But that is not to say that I would want to use those places as a place to build my wealth. And so
that's the key thing.
And I think so the place in which we agree is the best place on the planet right now, which may change. Right now, no question about it, the United States is definitely the best place to build wealth. I believe that's going to change. I believe that in the next 20 to 40 years, I think Africa is going to be on the map because you have the youngest population. You have a continent with 54 countries and vast natural resources. And, you and I were talking offline and we were talking about, like, they have coastline all around the entire continent. And so there are places where there are shallow ports, but there are also places where you have deep ocean liners that come in.
Water ports.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I believe that Africa will be the next China in the next 20 to 40 years. And so to your point, and I'll wrap up the point, which is this. As it relates to AI, technology, and building wealth, there's no other country that I'd rather be from that standpoint than the United States.
I think that the United States will continue to be what it is, or any country for that matter, that bases their fundamental values on Christian values. I'm not pushing religion or spirituality on anybody, but if you look at the core of Christian-based values, that is what has allowed America to jump. Capitalism and Christian-based values. That's it. This is the country that has Christian-based values from the start, was born that way, and was born with capitalism. So I think that if it holds on to that, then yes. The only challenge I have with the Africa situation is that as we start to shift, as we start to shift into this century, into the end of this century, I think we're going in the direction where you're not going to see a lot of stuff done on the planet anymore. And what I mean by that is you're going to see the source of production being offshot or relegated to low Earth or high Earth orbit, or even lunar stuff. You're going to start to see that it's going to happen in this century, where we are no longer going to be manufacturing on host said planet. It's going to happen offsite. I think
I don't see
where I see it.
Okay, so
as a result, if Africa can gain sovereignty and gain some unity, I think Africa could become a United States. You know what I mean? Like if they could unite, because they can't do it in singularity. They have to do it in uniformity. Mm-hmm. So if Africa as a continent has a shot, or even thinks that having a shot of becoming a global superpower, which I believe they can with the amount of resource, because resource is ultimately what's going to be what's of value. Resource to produce futuristic products. Mm-hmm. So if they can come in unison and they can unite and become a united state and follow a blueprint like the United States would do, then I think Africa is poised to become a very serious contender because they have a lot of resource. And ultimately that resource is going to be off planet to produce and manufacture and create resources to bring back. Because that's how you solve the pollution problem too. If you're manufacturing in space, who cares? You're shuttling it back and forth. I think it's a very exciting time in regards to that's where AI needs to be. The AI needs to be focusing on how to get pollution and manufacturing off the planet so we can save the planet, not reducing. Yeah, let's get efficient in our productive and our value in our manufacturing processes, in our pollution processes, in our recycling process, or whatever you want to call it. But let's focus R&D on how to get the crap that pollutes the planet off the planet and then build it that way. I think that's where you're looking at it. So I know that's a totally different direction.
That's a very interesting perspective. I definitely I can agree with.
But then again, I'm a visionary and I'm a futurist that way, Len. So
no, that's good.
Outlandishly,
people like you, they call you crazy until you're not, and then you're genius. So I, Well,
I mean,
so I'm either talking to a person that's crazy or is a genius. So I think you're a little bit of both.
I know him. Yeah, I know that guy. I used to podcast with that guy. Guy. He used to sell financial services with me.
That's right.
Now he's Yeah, no, I'm not saying that's going to happen or anything. I just that's just the way I think, because I
just don't think you can get around. I hear what you're saying in terms of using it, extraplanetary innovation to move the needle forward. But I just think in terms of the way that we as human beings are connected to the earth, I think the answer is here. And what I mean by that is...
It is.
So, like what we breathe out, trees breathe in, right? And vice versa. We have a symbiotic relationship with trees. And so, natural resources that come out of the ground are things that we need to eat and sustain our lives. And I think that was by design. And so I think there is room for, space and interplanetary productivity and things like that. I just don't think that's the most efficient way. I think that should be the side hustle, if you will, not the main job. So anyway, that's interesting. So
it's switching gears to kind of close this out today. Here's, I think, the biggest job that I think all of us can have. Or do have. I don't say all of us can have. I think this is the biggest job that all of us have already. And we talked earlier about, self-development and things like that. But, the number one killer of people when they get older is falling. And interestingly enough, I was just having a conversation with my mom about this a couple weeks ago because she fell walking her dog and she's 78. I went, Mom, you realize that? And she's like, yeah, I had an eggplant coming out of my hip. That's how swollen it was. I went, dang, wow. Mom, you're crazy. I said, but you're good, right? She's good. She didn't break anything. But I'm like, or fracture anything. But I'm like, Mom, you realize that if you break your hip, you are now 6 months away from dying.
Yeah.
She said, but why? What else? I said, because you can't move anymore. And I'm a big fan of Dr. Peter Attia. I know you are as well. And a couple other doctors on YouTube or internet, which I listen to. I don't listen to regular medical doctors and works. I think they're all full of, you know what? And they're all liars. But anyway, the number one biggest thing, obviously, is relationships for longevity, but not falling. And things like that, and maintaining muscle strength and maintaining lean muscle as you get older, and those are the important things. And one of the biggest things that I have been doing really, really lately now that I've added into my protocols, and I love that we're talking about this today, is I have really heavily incorporated all different types of military exercises and all different types of calisthenics, stretching, all those things, because I don't feel any chronic pain. I never have chronic pain. I don't have any of that stuff. Thank God I'm very good in those departments. But I started to feel like my knee was bothering me a little bit. My elbow was bothering me a little bit. And I was like, what the heck? I was like, and again, going back to my normal way of operating, I just couldn't accept the normal. Because if I would have went to a doctor, like a normal doctor, went, oh, you need here's a sick. They would have given me what, Len? Ibuprofen, prescription for the pain, and all this BS. Yep. So instead, what I did was I changed my leafy green intake and I reduced it a little bit. So I reduced the amount of leafy greens I take in, and I increased a little bit the amount of red meat I eat. And all of a sudden, I noticed these joint pains go away, and I'm like, awesome. Right. And then I do the science behind it. And I was like, all right, cool. I had too much oxalates in my blood, which are leafy greens produce oxalates, which are also hard on your kidneys because you get, the buildups of the oxalates in the joints and all these things. And then when you look at the red meat actually can regrow the tendons and all those things. And by the way, only grass-fed, 100% grass-fed, non-GMO, organic, 80-20 is what I eat. Just if you're out there, I like a little bit more fat. It doesn't taste as gamey as a 15%. But these are the things that people can start, that need to be they ought to be doing now. You know, like I didn't know did you know that the deep squat is the original, is the OG human sitting or resting position, meaning your heels flat on the ground. It almost looks like you're getting ready to do a number two, but you're like, you know what I'm talking about? Your back straight. That is the original human resting position. I didn't realize that I couldn't do it. 90 days ago, I couldn't do it. Now I can do it without my back against the wall. And it is absolutely incredible, Len. Like, I was just doing Christmas decorations, so you have to lift big modular heavy crates. And normally you just bend over and lift it. I don't do that. I could deep squat all the way and lift it, and I couldn't believe how easy it is. And most people are going to look at this and go, oh, that's the way you should be lifting all the time. Look, I'm 44. I don't know everything, right? But I couldn't believe the difference in mobility by doing it. So translation into everybody, you should be stretching, you should be doing calisthenics, you should be moving, and you should be learning how to create these protocols and these routines to move your body like you could when you were 5, 10, 12. Like, for example, you should be able to stand up straight and sit down into Indian style and then stand up from an Indian style position. I could do it now. I couldn't do it 9 months ago.
Without putting your hands on the floor. Yeah.
Without using your hands, yes. Additionally, you should be able to lay on your back flat and stand up. Like, do a sit-up and stand up at the same time. You should be able to do it without your hands. So that, I think I want to bring that up, Len, because that's really important. And I know you're in that space. You see it. Look, if you cannot move, if you lose your mobility as you age, that is the number one thing that is going to kill you. It's going to kill you. So, Len, your perspective on that, because I know you're big on that. You probably got some data on that, but falls, not being mobile, huge.
Yeah, you know, I want to speak directly to two different groups of people. It's the same group, but who have two different focuses. If you are an adult with an aging parent and you yourself are aging, I need you to listen to me carefully. I did some research like Chris talked about. According to the CDC, adults aged 65 and older, there are 14 million people who report falling each year. Falling is the number one predictor of shorter lifespan. And because what Chris talked about, when you get those fractures in your hip and now you start to lose mobility and then you start to lose the ability to use your muscles, then what happens is there becomes this negative cascading effect. And so you've got to understand that you're not lifting weights for vanity purposes. You're not looking to get the six pack. Your goal is not to have, bulging muscles or anything like that. It's to build your core and to maintain strength. If you look at studies by orthopedic surgeons and doctors that specialize in the body and physical fitness, you begin to see that there's overwhelming evidence that shows that strength is the higher predictor than even good nutrition. Now, I think you need to do both. So I'll give you a couple of examples. If you are a male, you need to be able to hang from a bar for 2 minutes to sustain your body weight. So freestanding, so you're holding a bar and you're just allowing your body to drop. You should be able to sustain that for 2 minutes. If you're a female, you need to be able to do that for 90 seconds. If you're a male, you should be able to take a kettlebell or a dumbbell and take half of your body strength in your left and your right arm and walk and hold that and be able to transport that. If you're a female, you should be able to do 75% of your body weight. And so those are early predictors to show that you have the necessary strength for your body to continue to live. Because see, what happens is when your muscles start to shrink, the scientific term is atrophy, right? Once your muscles start to shrink, what happens is your bone density starts to decrease. So And when your muscles shrink and your bone density gets weaker, then you have less mobility for being able to balance. So you should be able to stand with your eyes closed, and you should be able to hold up one leg without falling for 60 seconds on your right and your left. If you can't do those stabilizing types of activities, that's not to say that you're going to die soon. That's just to show, that's a predictor to show that there may be some things you need to work on and be proactive. And so if you have if you're an adult child with an aging parent and you're starting to see, their lack of mobility, or you're starting to see their spine start to get like a hunch on the back part of it, that means that there's some issues with their bones and their posture. And, because the way the spine is it has flexible material in between, with that cartilage. And so the spine is pliable. Now, if you have, conditions like, osteosclerosis and, which is, a brittling of the bones, of course, I'm not speaking to that. I'm talking about a healthy aging person that doesn't have any existing chronic issues. The exercises that I just talked about, they're correctable. And so it's so very important. Ladies, a big misconception is that the moment you start lifting weights, you're going to turn into a bodybuilder the next day. That's not how it works. Muscle is the hardest thing to build. It takes the most time, and it takes the most energy, and it takes the most effort. So most of you will start to feel sore in your bone, in your muscles, and then you'll end up quitting. So you don't have to worry about bulking up, so just the main thing is start doing those exercises, doing things like heel toe raises, doing those things, or walking in a straight line where you put your heel in front of your toes in a straight line, like they make people do when they're drunk, the sobriety test. Those all come down to balance. And so if you have good balance and you have good posture and you have good muscle strength, you are in a position to uniquely set yourself up for longer life and a higher quality of life while you're living, and you significantly reduce chronic disease. So, this just some food for thought. I really hope that you take that seriously, because studies are getting very, very clear and decisive about the connection between strength and longevity.
Yeah, for sure. Movement. It's so huge. And I mean, I can acknowledge it. I mean, I take care of myself, but I'm 44 now, and I can tell you with confidence, it's like I have to do proactive things now. I can't just get up in the morning now and go, yeah. Like I actually have to be proactive about strength training and about all those different things. And I think that it's healthy for you. I think that there's a lot of different therapies and things that happen when you do that and you build, you're building lean muscle, but also too at the same time, look, everyone's got time. Everyone's got a YMCA by them. Take a Chai Chi class. Take a mixed martial arts class. Take a self-defense class. Like, it's so important today to do those things mentally, physically, all those things. There's so much access to it. You have YouTube. You could do routines just by watching people on YouTube for free. Like the amount of information that we have today. But again, people will only go and seek it if they want to. But look, if you have parents, take care of them, get the advice out there. And then for you're eventually going to be that way. So I don't want my kids to have to be burdened by any of that stuff. And let's face it, your health is your wealth, because when you're not healthy or something's bothering you, all you can think about is that thing that's bothering you. You can't think about anything else. So life tends to become very miserable when you're not in good health. So I think that's more important than anything that we talked about today. I think a lot of people would probably find that the most boring thing. I think I find it fascinating, just simply because you won't be able to enjoy all the cool things that you want to do in life or the next 10, 20, 30 years if you're, around with us, if you can. So, take care of yourself, because the more you do, the better you feel, the better you look, and life just becomes very easy, physically, anyways, emotionally. I don't know.
I agree.
We could be full, and outside of that, Len, have a great Thanksgiving. Stay safe. I know we talked about that. It's gonna be pretty quiet. I'm actually gonna be in New Orleans, so that's cool.
Nice.
Yeah, I've never been, so we'll see how that goes. I'm not going there to have a rage or anything like that. Just going there to get away. But
that's cool.
Everybody have a safe, productive holiday, and wishing you guys well. Again, if you like this content, this conversations, you could message us, get involved, like, subscribe, do all those cool things that people do to social media stuff. And with that being said, Len, always a pleasure. I'll see you next week, sir.
All right, have a good one.
Bye.
Conversation has given you clarity on your next steps. Please share this episode with someone who's walking the same path. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss future episodes. And remember, planning ahead isn't just prudent, it's an act of care. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on The Family Office.